Bhagavad Gita is a book of mankind's collected experience of and answers to life's most basic questions. Who I am, from where do I come, what is my purpose and destiny, and most practically, how do I find happiness? These podcasts originate in the lectures of Neil Bhatt, a disciple of Swami Chinmayananda. They are presented here in 20 to 30-minute segments, each covering 3 of the Gita's 701 verses. Welcome to Gita Wisdom for Daily Living.
We had been discussing chapter 7, Gnana Vijnana Yoga, Yoga of Knowledge and Wisdom. We have seen in first 6 chapters, Bhagwan clarified that the self, which I consider my own self, is the part of the Supreme Self. It is none other than the Supreme Self. But I don't have that experience, so we have seen some techniques in chapter 6 of how to prepare your mind to experience that oneness with that Supreme Self. To know the Supreme Self, we need to have some clear understanding. So chapter 7 is devoted to explaining the Supreme Self. One has clearly said that everything comes out of me and everything is strung into my own self. Bhagwan has given several indications, and then in the end comes to tell us why we are not experiencing it. So in the last few verses, we're actually seeing Bhagwan's explanation about this dichotomy that I have. On one hand, I have an understanding about this Supreme Self and unity of all things, but I have no experience whatsoever. So Bhagwan clarified, driven by various desires, Taihi, this and that, various desires, we worship other devata. In other words, we pursue other entities we consider will have that capability to give me that ultimate experience of happiness. Those who worship those devatas, they achieve that result only. So we basically have seen in last 4 verses, Bhagwan it says that a devotee worships whatever form. I strengthen that faith. All empowerment comes from me, the Supreme Self, because then nothing really exists other than the Supreme Self. In our logic of spirituality, we have come to the conclusion that if this world was created by God, that Supreme Being, the Supreme Self existed before the creation of this universe. And if the creation of universe was created by the Supreme Self, that entity required 2 causes. One is material cause and the other is efficient cause. Then material could not have come from other than his own self, and therefore he is in and through everything in this universe, including my own self. But I'm not experiencing it, so I create a conception in my mind about that Supreme Self in a one form or another, and then worship that form to get what I am looking for in this world, which is happiness. So Bhagwan said, I strengthen that faith in whatever form a person worships me. And therefore, he becomes even more devoted to that form. And then he receives the results of his worship, of his pursuits, of his efforts. In whatever field, wherever I put my faith, that's where my happiness lies. I put my actions in that field, then I'll get the results from that field. But Bhagwan said, consider that all of them coming from me, because there is no other entity, no other devata existing other than me. So in any form or any name you worship me, and the results you get out of your pursuit, they're all coming from me alone. However, there's a limitation. Because you have looked for finite goals, you're getting finite results. The fruits which I'm getting out of my efforts of worshipping or pursuing that particular form of deity, a particular form of God, and then asking for a particular result, a particular fruit. Bhagwan said you will get it. As long as you desire it from your heart and put efforts to get it, You will get it, but it is limited in time and space. That fruit will have its expiry date. And therefore, you will not get that permanent happiness. All that we see is Prakriti, and Prakriti has its own limitations. Anything I get out of this Prakriti will be finite, and therefore I will get only the finite fruits and finite results, and therefore only temporary happiness. But if I can overcome that limitation and worship the Supreme Self, Bhagavan said that devotee will come to me. He will become one with me and will get the ultimate happiness, the everlasting happiness. And that's basically what we have seen in last 4 verses. And now Bhagavan says, Na aham prakasah sarvasya. I am not available to all. I am not manifest to all. Not everyone has capability to conceptualize this all-pervading Supreme Self. Yogamaya sam avrutaha, because I am covered in this Yogamaya. It's not really Bhagavan is covered in Yogamaya. It is my understanding is covered by Yogamaya. So here Bhagavan uses the word Yogamaya because the Maya is also supported by Brahman, the Supreme Self. In our common language, we call it consciousness. I do not feel that all-pervasiveness of the consciousness. I feel the consciousness is limited to me. That's my first experience. And then I infer that because there are other beings acting like me, that they also have similar consciousness. But I do not make connection between my consciousness and their consciousness. And therefore now we have several consciousnesses as we perceive it. And Bhagavan said that ignorance is because of my Yoga Maya. This Maya, in our day-to-day term, we call it our own perception of reality. Our perception of reality is limited by capability of our own senses and our mind and our intellect. I perceive my world through my senses and my mind and my intellect. You perceive your world through your mind and your intellect. I am in the center of my world, you are in the center of your world. And when these worlds overlap on each other, that becomes our relationship. But Bhagavan said, one who has gone above his own limitations of these senses, he can see the unity of things. So he said, therefore, I am not available to all. Most people in this world, or most beings in this world, have these limitations, what they consider their own reality. And now lots of scientific pursuits are being pursued to understand reality. And there are lots of seminars I see which say the reality is not as it seems. That what we consider real is not real. And I came across on YouTube a seminar called Reality is Not As It Is, and there is a cognitive scientist, Donald Hoffman. He obviously says that the reality as we perceive is just a representation. It's like an interface. That we just have some interface, just like we have on our iPhone, that I can touch an icon and get to a particular function, but that does not tell me how that function is working. So in the same way, what we have is a representation for our utilitarian use, but we don't know the reality. Science is now coming to the same conclusion. And they boldly now claim that consciousness is not physical and it's not emergent, it's fundamental. So Bhagavan said that I am not really available for everyone's understanding. Mudaha ayam. And here ayam means the world of beings. Na abhijanati. They do not know. Mam ajam avyayam. That I am ajam, unborn, and avyayam. Ajam, we have discussed many times that jatasya hi dhruvo mrityuho. We have learned in chapter 2 that one who is born will have death. So if something is permanent, you obviously cannot have death. If something is permanent and have no death, then it also cannot have any birth. It's fundamental. It's always there before anything else that I can think of. Now, our brain is not wired to even conceptualize the idea that something can exist before everything has come into being in this world. In our world, everything comes into existence from a previous form of existence. We can say, where does this table come from? It came from the wood which was brought from Home Depot. So where did the wood came into the Home Depot, I say, from whatever the supplier. So we can always go back and trace the source of that thing or a being. But here Bhagavan said, there is nowhere to go when you think about the supreme reality, the supreme self, the supreme consciousness. And therefore it says, my real nature, ajaha. There is nowhere to go before my existence. It is before the Big Bang. We are not capable of thinking what that existence could be. So therefore Bhagavan says, Mudha ayam. This world is designed in a way that the beings in this world are not capable of conceptualizing an existence without any source, without any previous state of existence. Avyayam. And it is also immutable. In other words, right now it seems that the Bhagavan, who was at one time a pristine being, he transformed himself into this world. If this world was created out of his own self, then the Bhagavan became, at one time was a singular entity, now became this pluralistic world. So he has mutated into this world. And Bhagavan said, no, that is not the truth. In other words, he never created this world or never became this world. So this transformation from God to the world is really an illusion created by my own mind. The world exists because I perceive it. So if I lose the sense of sight, my world of sight goes away. If I lose the sense of sound, the world of sound goes away. And if I lose all my five senses, the world disappears. So Bhagavan says, I have never transformed myself into this world or this multiple beings, but mudha ayam lokaha. This world is ignorant about it, and therefore they do not know me in my own nature. Vedaha aham sam atitani vartamanani cha Arjuna bhavishyani cha bhutani mam tu vedana kaschanaha. I know all the beings of the past, present and future, but no one knows me. This is a very commonly understood idea that Bhagavan knows everything, but I don't know Bhagavan. But we have difficulty understanding it. If Bhagavan knows everything, then why I'm not getting that clear direction every day? Bhagavan said, I know every being because they are created out of my own self. It is something like my own thoughts. I know all my thoughts. I know my thoughts in the past. I know my thoughts in present. And I also will know my thoughts in future. At least I know in what line of thinking I will have in the future. So my thoughts are all available to me because I am the generator of my thoughts. But a one single thought cannot know me because that one thought is not me. And therefore Bhagavan said, any single creation of mine cannot know me in totality, but I know all my creation. When an entity identifies with the Supreme Being, which is what we call in Vedanta a realized person. Lord Krishna here, when he talks about this reality, he is not talking as the son of Vasudeva and Devaki, but as the Supreme Self. Therefore, in the previous verse, he said, Ignorant people think that I have become a person. The Supreme Self has become a person. But see that you will never be able to conceptualize the entire Supreme Self into one incarnation. Divinity is all-pervading, all-knowing consciousness. Therefore, it's a Vedaham samatitani vartamanani cha Arjuna bhavishyani cha bhutani matu vedana kaschan. As an individual, you are not capable of knowing the Supreme Self, the consciousness which is all-pervading. You have to drop your individuality. You have to dissolve your ego to get to that point of understanding. And therefore, in the next verse, he says, why we are not seeing is Ichha dvesa samuttena dvandva mohena bharata sarvabhutani sammoham sarge yanti parantapa. By this delusion of this pairs of opposites. Our world is divided into pairs of opposites, likes and dislikes, things which I like, things which I don't like, things I want to avoid, things I want to acquire. This world has started that way for me right from my birth. Because as any individual, there is a strong sense of survival. And this instinct for survival is creating this world into a world which can help me surviving and the world which can hurt me. This pursuit has created Ichha, the desire, and Dvesha. That's something which I like and desire and something I don't like. Sarvabhutani sammoham. They are deluded by these pairs of opposites. The very fact that I have taken birth is the proof that I have desires. As we have learned before, that I chose my own body the way I am right now because it serves a purpose, can fulfill my desires. So I came across a very interesting familial tree in Gnaneshwari. Gnaneshwar Maharaj says in the beginning, the ego, the jiva, he falls in love with the body. And says, oh, this is the body which I can fulfill all my goals. And then that waiting between the ego and the body gives birth to a daughter named desire. This desire then in turn weds to hatred. So the hatred with the things which are in my way. Now this union between the desire and hatred gives birth to a son named delusion. He said this delusion is raised by his grandfather, ego, on the milk of hopes and in various ideas. And therefore now it is constantly mired in confusion and just cannot get to the clear understanding of the real truth. So it's very interestingly put by Gnaneshwar Maharaj, but Bhagavan says here in a simple term that right from the birth we are under the spell of Maya. Right from the birth I have become a limited entity which is associated with the body and then mind and then intellect. As long as I am associated with this body, mind and intellect, I am under the spell of Maya. Maya which creates this world of plurality out of singularity. It's an illusion created by the Supreme Self. And the goal of life, as Bhagavad Gita teaches, is to get out of this illusion. We'll stop right here. If you find this podcast helpful, please support it by donating any amount by going to the episode's website at neilbhatt.podbean.com or at chinmayarichmond.org. Thank you. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhave. Om Shantihi Shantihi
Shanti. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.